The child gushed out from twixt Vern's legs, ragged and smelling of salt. Slight he was, and feeble as a promise. He felt in her palms a great wilderness, such a tender thing as he could never be parsed fully by the likes of her. Had she more strength, she'd have limped to the river and drowned him. It'd be a gentler end than the one the fiend had in mind. Vern leaned against the trunk of a loblolly and pressed the child naked and limp to her chest. His trembling lips lay right where the heart-shaped charm of a locket would be, if she'd ever had a locket. So that's how it's gonna be, Win me over with lip wibbles? She asked. And though she was not one to capitulate to bids for love, this baby had a way about him that most did not. There was courage in his relentless neediness. He would not be reasoned out of his demands. Hey y'all, welcome back to the Free Black Women's Library YouTube channel. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. Thank you for liking this video, and thank you for subscribing to my channel. I really appreciate y'all's support with that. Welcome back to another Rambly reaction. Today I'm talking about an amazing book. It's titled SORROWLAND, and it's written by Rivers Solomon, one of my favorite writers. This is their third book. The first one is called The Deep. The second one is called An Unkindness of Ghosts, and this is their third. So I have not read The Deep. I believe it is a novella, but I did read The Unkindness of Ghosts last year, and I absolutely loved it. I fell in love with this author after reading that book. It probably was one of my favorite books that I read in 2020, so when I found out that they were coming out with a new book this year, I got it right away and I devoured it. So yeah, one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this book, outside of the fact that I enjoyed it so much, is that after I finished reading it, I went online just to see what other people were saying about it, check out the reviews, check out the commentary, and it was so mixed. Like, there were some people who really hated it, and there were some people who really loved it. It was very like a mix, and I thought that was really interesting and really significant. I really actually appreciate works that get those type of mixed reactions, because I feel like that means that it is something that is very subjective, and what the different things that are being dealt with in the piece, whether it be a film, a book, or a TV show, can be really left up to the person that's consuming it, left up to their interpretation. But either way, I really loved it. If I were going to give it a score, I think I would give it an 8 out of 10. And I want to talk about it a little more, but I'm going to try my best to not give away too much of the story. For those who haven't read it, who might want to read it and are really bothered by spoilers, I'm going to try my best to not spoil it for you, but I will be talking about the plot and the characters and the different themes that are explored in this book. So firstly, let's talk about the genre of it. So it's described as a genre-bending gothic horror, and that makes sense to me. And I feel like when it comes to the people that would enjoy this book, in terms of like who I would recommend it to, I would recommend it to people who love speculative fiction, who love science fiction, who love mythology, who love fantasy, who love horror, who love really kind of out there weird stories, who are not easily triggered, because there is a lot of violence in the book. There's sexual violence, there's racist violence, there's a lot of brutality that does take place. It's very graphic and very visceral, and very savage, so if you're the sensitive type who is bothered by all those things I mentioned, then this is probably not the book for you. Or just like breathe through it and take your time, is what I would say. And actually, no matter what you're into, If you do decide to read this book, definitely it is the type of story that requires you to take your time and really pay attention. It's not an easy story at all. The writing is very lyrical, it's very beautiful, but it's also a lot that goes on. There are a lot of characters, there's a lot of there's so much that happens in this book. So it's not one of those books that you can like breeze through. It's not a light read, right? I definitely took my time with it, and I actually had to read it more than once to really get an understanding of the plot. Like, for instance, I saw a couple of reviews from folks who said that they didn't understand the story, and they were like, what's going on? The story is all over the place. And I don't think that's true. I think it's actually a very normal story. Well, not normal, but it's actually a story that's easy to follow if you just pay attention to the clues. So anyway, let me talk about the different things that go on. How can I say this? I'll talk about the plot. Okay. So as you know, this is a Rambly reaction, so I'm going to try my best to just like stay focused and stay linear in my processing and in my sharing. But I'll tell you about the plot. It is about a young girl named Vern, who is an albino, and when we first meet Vern, she is just giving birth to her first child. Vern ends up having 2 children. Their names are Howling and Feral. Vern is also 15, so she's very, very young. And the books takes place over the span of 4 years. So we might even categorize it as a coming of age story, right? Because when we first meet Vern, she's 15. And when we say goodbye to Vern in the last chapter, she's 19. So when we look at what coming of age means, as far as like a young person's journey towards finding themselves or defining themselves, that is something that takes place. So we can call it that, as well as all the other things I mentioned. And it's also a love story, actually, because there is a point in time when Vern does find love, and it is a love that is really beautiful, really precious, really tender, and really healing at the same time. So there's that aspect of it. Now, Vern, part of the reason why Vern is in the forest is because she has escaped a cult. Vern was a child bride, and the person that she was married to is the leader of the cult, Reverend Sherman. And she's like, fuck it, I'm ready to be out. So she escapes into the woods while she's pregnant. She gives birth to her babies in the woods. And part of the reason that she's able to survive in the woods for so long is that while she was in the cult, one of the things that they make sure that people learn how to do is how to live off the land, how to farm, how to, make medicines, how to make clothing, all these different things. So she does have some really amazing survival skills. So in that instance, that felt, because at first I was like, how is she able to be in the woods by herself for so long? But that's something that's explained later on, so that kind of made it make sense. And there's some stuff going on with Vern. In addition to being an albino, I hope that's not offensive, but that is how she is described in the book. She does have a couple of disabilities. She has problems seeing. She's, her eyes sometimes don't often work well. And she also can't read. Like, she's also illiterate. Now, in addition to that, she has some other stuff going on with her, which I don't want to give away too much of because it's part of like the main point of the plot. But she does face some really serious physical challenges, as well as some stuff around her mental health and her emotional health. But she's a survivor, right? Vern is a badass. And I actually, part of the reason why I really love this book is because I love this character. Now, I don't know about y'all, but it's really hard for me to read a book and enjoy a book when I don't like the characters. Even if the book is extremely well written, it's hard for me to enjoy a book if I don't like the people that it's about. And that's something that I encounter often. I don't know about y'all, but it's really frustrating when a writer is excellent at writing a plot and telling a story, but the people that they're writing about are just like awful. And it's the same thing with TV too. Like there's a show, Transparent, that's really popular, and I tried to get into that show because everybody was like, the show is so good, but that family is horrid. Like everyone in that family is awful, including the main character who plays the trans woman. I forget his name. He's a really popular actor, but that's just one example. And there's a lot of shows out there like that. I'm not sure what that popularity is about. I don't know if I'm the only person like that. You tell me. What do you think about that? But either way, I love Vern. I love Vern. She's courageous. She's determined. She's unique. She really, she's a fighter, you know. She's brave as fuck. And yeah, I love Vern. I love Vern. So anywho, she's the main character. And then we have some other characters like her ma'am. We have her twins, Howling and Feral. Howling is born darker skinned, and Feral has the same complexion as Vern, which is described as the color of milk. So she's raising them in the woods, and she's going through these different things. And in the end, truths are revealed that connect to the reasons why she has the physical challenges that she has, to why she has the mental and emotional challenges that she's dealing with, etc., etc. Yeah, I don't want to give too much of it away. Maybe I'll do another video where I talk about the plot in detail. Maybe that might make more sense. I don't know. This is interesting. This is a challenge for me. You tell me what you would prefer. As far as like when I do Rambly reactions talking about books, should I talk about the plot in detail, or should I just try to give like little bits away? Either way, what I'm going to talk about are the different themes that are explored in this book. Not all of them, but some, and possibly part of the reasons why I love it. Now, the first theme for me is motherhood. I'm a mom, so maybe I'm biased, but I love a motherhood theme, and Vern is a mom, and the way she's raising her twins could be considered very radical, somewhat revolutionary, somewhat, you know, very, very different. She's very much not interested in coddling them, in over babying them. She kind of goes through this back and forth in the beginning about whether or not she even wants to be a mom, and she struggles with, you know, feeling like she's doing a good job. But I like the fact that she doesn't define them by gender. She just calls them her children. She has an ownership over them and a protectiveness of them. And she, you know, they're not boys or girls to her. They're just her babes, right? So she's a fierce mother, and she's a different type of mother. She lets them run free. She lets them run wild. She lets them question her. She speaks to them as if they have a deep understanding, even though they're like toddlers. She doesn't talk down to them. She doesn't baby them. She gives them the real truth, and I really love that. And then there's Vern's mom. When I talk about the theme of motherhood, part of the reason that Vern ended up on the compound where she was raised with Reverend Sherman is because her mom was struggling with addiction, and the only way that the state or the city would allow her to keep Vern is if she committed to living on the compound, and she just like decided to live her whole life there, right? So this compound is being presented as a safe space for Black people. It's being presented as like this really like radical place, really politicized place, being led by this man who is so-called Black power, right? He's like a fake, it's like a fake move, right? If y'all know about Move, that was a real revolutionary organization that gathered together as family, as community in Philadelphia, right? But this compound is called Caneland, and it's like, it's a setup, all right? But either way, Vern's mom was so, she was so afraid and so like in need of support for raising her baby that she signed her life away to live on this compound. Like she would, instead of them taking her baby away, she committed to going to Caneland, and it ended up being one of the worst decisions that she's ever made. So there's motherhood, and I think part of what's being explored here is what Black mothers, especially Black mothers, poor Black mothers, mothers from marginalized communities, mothers who are dealing with the disease of addiction or isolation, abuse, loneliness, how limited we can be in terms of our options, and the things that we do to survive sometimes are worse than actual death, right? Because we're just trying to survive. We're just trying to live out here. So I think part of what's being explored here when it comes to this theme is like how hard it is in a hetero, racist, capitalist patriarchy, how hard it is for poor Black mothers to live. So there's that. And there's also this radical way of raising children, and also like part of what helps Vern survive is how radical she is with raising her kids, right? So there's that. Another theme that I want to talk about very quickly, I kind of touched on it a little bit, is the theme of isolation and the theme of loneliness, and how being isolated and being lonely is something that can actually kill the spirit. You know, it's something that can actually destroy the psyche. It's something that can actually literally like break you down, right? There's a YouTube video that I watched recently on loneliness that talked about how loneliness is actually deadly. Like it can actually kill you. Like being lonely can actually kill you, right? And I think one of the things that happened with Vern being alone in the forest for years is her spirit starts to weaken, and she starts to feel afraid, and she realizes that she really needs community, she really needs support, she really needs someone else, right? Not just in terms of the raising of these kids, but in terms of all the physical stuff she's dealing with and all the emotional stuff she's dealing with. So there's that concept, that theme of loneliness and isolation. And I think part of what River Solomon is saying here is that, you know, despite the fact that the community that was established in Caneland, despite the fact that it was violent and toxic, it was something that had such a huge influence on Vern, and it was something that she was willing to connect to and be around in some type of way, right? I don't want to give too much away, but I feel like I am. But either way, she's on the hunt to find community, right? After being in the forest for so long, she decides that she needs to find somebody out there. And she has her best friend, Lucy, who she ends up looking for. So Lucy was also on the compound, and Lucy escaped, right? Yeah. So the next theme that I have written down in my notes is that of queerness. When I say queerness, I'm talking about anything that falls under the LGBTQIA umbrella, right? So Vern is intersex, And one of the reasons that I wanted to make this video and talk about this book is because that is something that I noticed in a lot of the reviews and a lot of the commentary on the book is people really didn't understand like Vern's gender and Vern's like sexuality or whatever. So Vern is intersex, right? Vern is also queer, right? Even though she is pregnant, she's like struggling with the pregnancy and being a mom and everything. She's actually a queer woman who has a queer girl. Let me not adultify her. She's queer. She's a lesbian, right? She is attracted to women mainly, and that's something that is seen as an abomination at Caneland, which is part of the reason I think why she decides to leave. Is because Reverend Sherman tried to make her feel horrible about being queer and the fact that she was attracted to women, right? So queerness is explored in various ways. Vern being a lesbian, Vern being intersex, and also Vern, her love interest, the person that she falls in love with, who's named Gogo, who's a Native American woman and who is also, from the way she's described, somewhat androgynous, possibly masculine presenting, somewhat of a player too, and also might be considered two-spirited in terms of what I have read about it, what it means to be two-spirited. But either way, Vern and Gogo, which is such a cool name, fall in love. So sidebar, I love the names in this book and what they mean. The different names that are used in this book are very intentional. I think River Solomon does an excellent job of naming all of these characters and also explaining why they have the names they have. For instance, all the people that are born in Caneland are named after like Black ancestors, Thurgood Marshall, Stokely Carmichael, etc., etc. So, you know, and then Howling and Farrell, the twins. I love those names, and it makes so much sense. Like for babies that are born in the forest, it makes so much sense for them to have those names. So, anywho, so that's another theme that I just wanted to touch on very quickly. At least I think it was quickly. So, another theme, another story arc, another thread in this book is that of medical racism and government experimentation on Black folks. So, you may not know that the father of gynecology, Sims, was someone who experimented on Black women's bodies without anesthesia and basically like used Black women for all types of weird, disgusting, brutal, violent research, right? Because, you know, this whole thing about Black people not feeling pain and everything, and still in 2021, Black bodies within the medical industrial complex are still savagely used and brutalized. And it's a lot, y'all. So, anywho, part of the reason why Vern is suffering with the, I'll say, disabilities that she has is because of government experimentation, because of the things that are going on in Caneland, because of the things that are going on with the nature of Caneland, the earth, etc., etc. Vern is haunted, you know, and she's suffering and she's struggling because it turns out she was a medical experiment. And it's really, really fucked up. But this part of the story is something that I'll say enjoyed, for lack of a better word, because I think that pulling this thread into fictional text that's something I've never encountered, and I think it's something really important, and it's a lot of fertile soil there as far as like what can be discovered and what can be uncovered and unraveled and illustrated through that story, as far as like the experimentation on Black bodies, how the medical industrial complex and how the government really treats Black people as if we're lab rats that can just be like played with and toyed with and turned into things, right? Like they're actually like trying to turn Vern into some type of weapon that they can control, and it's really fucked up. But I don't want to make this video too long, so I'm gonna keep going. And is that my last theme? Okay, I think I have two themes left. The second to last one is the relationship between human beings and nature, right? So we are constantly in relationship with nature. We're constantly in relationship with the sun, the sky, the water, the trees, the grass, the flowers, the weeds, the mushrooms, the berries. Like we as human beings are in a relationship with this, and that relationship can be healthy or it can be toxic, right? And it can be reciprocal at the same time, right? As the earth feeds and nurtures us, we can also feed and nurture the earth. And that's something that's explored all throughout this book, how important it is to have a deep understanding of what makes things grow, and how these things can be used. And even for people who are carnivores, when it comes to eating animals, having respect for the animal that's being eaten, you know, to the point where you're not just eating the flesh of the animal, but you're also using the skin to make clothing. You're using the feet, the bones to make a home, to make jewelry, like, and giving thanks and showing gratitude for that animal for giving you his or her life, right? So I really appreciate that. I really love that. I love that Rivers talks about that in this book, through different ways, through showing how Vern acts in the forest, through Gogo. Gogo's a healer. Gogo knows what different herbs to use, herbs, tinctures, and oils, natural things to use to heal, and to strengthen Vern as she's going through what she's going through. So I love that. I love that so much. So I guess the very last theme I'm going to talk about is sexual manipulation, right? So the thing that's really incredibly disturbing about this book is that Vern is a child. All these things that she's going through, when you think about the fact that she's only 15 through the age of 19, and like the horrific experiences that she's going through, it makes it really hard to digest. And one of the things that she goes through is that she is manipulated, she's sexually manipulated by who I would consider to be the villain in this story, a woman named Ali. I just gave something away by saying that. Damn. I'm sorry, y'all, but I'm gonna keep going. Either way, that's something that is explored in this book, and it's used. It's a theme that comes up a couple of times, but not all throughout. Damn, I didn't mean to give that away, but I gave it away, so I'm sorry, but I didn't give too much away. And I'm gonna stop there in terms of this themes. What I will say is that the writing in this book, it is lush, it is challenging, it is unique, it is disturbing, as I said, it is raw. It's a fierce, powerful story that I absolutely loved. And I think it turns out to be a pretty successful and powerful read. Like I said, I would give it an 8 out of 10. I think the ending is a little bit rushed. I think the buildup of the story, and when we're with Vern throughout the forest, and through when she first meets Ali and another villain, name, I'm not gonna say the name of the other villain, when she falls in love with Gogo, when you start to understand what makes Vern, how smart she is, you know, I think it takes you on a really beautiful journey. And like I said, I love this character, and she shows the character development is great. If I'm putting on like my writer's critique hat, I'll say the character development is great. And the ending, up until, like, let's say we broke the novel into 4 parts. The last quarter felt a little bit rushed, but the first 3 quarters make up for anything that might feel off in the last quarter. Like, it's just chef's kiss. So I think that's all to say about that. This is my first time in a long time doing a Rambly reaction on a book. This is my first Rambly reaction on a book, but not my first time talking about a book. But I'm probably going to do more of these because I've been reading a lot of really good books this year, and I just want to share them and talk about them with you all. And please let me know if you have read any of the work of River Solomon. Let me know if you read SORROWLAND or An Unkindness of Ghosts or The Deep. And if there's any books out there that you think I should check out, you can write those in comments. And also, just FYI, I read books by Black women and Black non-binary authors before anything else. But I do read everything. But those 2 author categories are what I'll be talking about in my reactions, most likely. And I just want to check through my notes real quick to make sure I talked about everything I want to talk about. And yes, I did. So yeah, thank you for checking out this video, and I'm wishing you all a wonderful, wonderful day. Please subscribe to my channel. I'm trying to get to 1,000 subscribers at some point. I know I can make it there. All right, y'all. That's it. Have a good day. Bye.